Sly Cooper was an action-adventure stealth platformer developed by Sucker Punch Productions. When I was younger, I loved Sly Cooper. It was one of my favorite games from my childhood, Sly Cooper 2 being my favorite game out of that series. The two characters I liked were Inspector Carmelita Montoya Fox and Constable Neela. Too bad she died because she betrayed the gang and almost became immortal. Unfortunately, I had a bad habit of not taking care of my games when I was a kid. I left the discs out instead of putting them back in their cases, causing them to get scratched or damaged. Most of the games I have are still in perfect working condition. However, some games are too glitched or out or unreadable to play on the PS2, and Sly Cooper 2 was one of those games. As I got older, I started to take better care of my games and replace the damaged ones. I was starting a video game collection and decided to replace my damaged copy of Sly Cooper 2. My grandma owns an antique store, and my mom would go there to help her with her store because of her old age. I would go there so I had something to do. My grandma's store had the stuff typical in an antique store. Old clocks, old furniture, and even some miscellaneous items. Rarely she would have something more modern than video games from the 90s or 2000s, such as an original Xbox. Recently, I went there to do some store work. I moved some stored items from the back of the place when I came across a copy of Sly Cooper 2. I checked the disc and it didn't have a scratch on it, not even a single smudge. I asked my grandma where she got the game and replied that she didn't know. The old stuff she gets in her store can't come from donations from charities or other places occasionally. A truck comes by to deliver the antique goods. She doesn't know exactly which delivery the game came in or where it even came from. Eventually, I asked her if I can keep the game, and she said yes, since nobody ever buys any of the old games in her store. When I finished, I went home with the game with me. Once I arrived back home, I fired up the PS2 by pressing the start button. It loaded the all too familiar black void with cubes floating, with the tall white structures floating in its infinite space. With stars moving back and forth, it was beautiful when I always looked at the startup screen. It reminded me of a city that was alive with life. I proceeded to press the eject button. The mechanical whir faintly screeched as the tray slowly moved forward and stopped. I took the Sly Cooper 2 disc out from its case and gently placed it on the PS2's tray. Before pressing it again to inject it, it pulled backwards before finally closing. The PS2 made a deep honing noise before the camera plunged into the deep space below. The PS2 logo faded into view on a black screen before cutting away. After the company logos of Sucker Punch Productions and Sony, the game loaded in. This is where I noticed something strange. The intro showing Sly sneakily moving around inside the Museum of Natural History was gone. Instead, a black background took its place, displaying the Sly 2 logo. I also noticed there was no menu option, only just the start option. I pressed start to start a new game where it immediately threw me to the gameplay. I was in Paris. There was no Cairo prologue. I was on the streets and started roaming around, where I quickly discovered that there were no rat-like enemies to fight, no coins, no objectives. I tried heading to Dimitri's place, where I found out that it was missing. Just a black space where it used to be, like it had been deleted from the game. I went to the safe house to change my character, and when I entered, only Sly was sitting at the table. Bentley and Murray weren't there, as if they didn't exist. No power-ups could be purchased either. I exited the safe house, and I spotted a message written in black text on the pavement. It read, "Are you ready to play again?" I was confused about what the message meant by play again. As I kept playing, these deviations I kept noticing were unignorable, especially from someone who has played Sly Cooper 2 before. After pointlessly roaming around the level trying to find something that resembled an objective, a cutscene triggered. The camera panned to one of the rooftops where cinematic black bars folded in. Carmelita Fox jumped into the camera's view. She assumed a pose, waving her yellow-colored gloved fist in the air. An animation from slide 1 before screaming, "I will get you, Cooper!" Puzzlingly, the voice actor didn't sound like Alicia Glidewell, but more like Roxana Ortega from slide 1 or Great Delisle from slide 4 with a more pronounced French accent. The camera panned back to Sly, who did not welcome Carmelita like he usually does. He didn't fold his arms were straight down, and his body was unmoving. He gave Carmelita this fearful, worrisome look as he remained silent. After the cutscene, the gameplay resumed, and Carmelita Fox was firing electric bolts at me. Usually in any Sly game, Carmelita's attacks were easy to dodge due to horrible aim. But this time, her attacks were dead on. She shot like the perfect markswoman. I ran down the street as she was firing electric bolts at me. I tried to find a turnoff, an alleyway, or even a shortcut, but I didn't find any of them, as the street was only one way. As I sprinted down the street, Carmelita's attacks became more difficult to avoid, as she kept jumping from rooftop to rooftop, raining down electric bolts, and on some occasions I almost got hit by them. I kept running down the street when I spotted another character in the distance. It was Constable Neela, standing at the far end with no chance of losing my pursuer. I ran towards her as I could only go straight. Eventually, I reached the end of the street with Carmelita still hot on my tail. I got close enough to Constable Neela to trigger a cutscene. Carmelita stopped firing electric bolts at me, and Neela spoke. "Cooper, we meet again." It was the same line from the third episode, but what came next, I never heard her say in Sly Cooper 2 before. "Cooper, are you ready to play again?" The voice actors exactly sound like Alicia Glidewell. It has to be an excellent impersonation of her voice. However, when the cutscene ended and gameplay resumed, Carmelita fired an electric bolt from her shock pistol. I couldn't react in time to dodge. I got hit, and Sly did his death animation before the game faded to black. The Sly Cooper logo then appeared on a black background, and I stared at the screen. I could hear something muffled playing in the background. It sounded like gagging, as if someone was trying to say something but couldn't. I heard chains rattling and something being thrashed. I couldn't be sure as they were muffled, like it had been recorded from a very horrible microphone from 2004, the same year the game was released. Then I could hear voices. They sounded to be feminine. I couldn't make out anything the voices were saying, as the quality was too poor to hear any distinguishable words. The voices, they sounded like they were in pleasure or glee. As the thrashing noise got louder, I could hear, to me, like a deep male moaning. This lasted for 2 minutes before cutting back to the gameplay. Sly was back on the street, and he looked injured. He had heaps of red welts that streaked across his body with black spots of varying sizes, to which I could only presume they were bruises. When I looked upon this sight, the only thought I could think to myself was, "What the hell did they do to you, Sly?" I pressed my thumb upwards on the analog stick to move Sly. As I did, Sly walked with his limp in his left leg. Because of this, he walked at a snail's pace. I couldn't get him to move faster. After a few seconds, Sly promptly collapsed to the ground and the game faded to black. It then faded to the title card of a starry-eyed encounter, but the animatics explaining exposition narrated by Sly wasn't there. Just the title card. It then cut to gameplay. I was placed in a random location. And just like the previous level, there were no enemies and no collectibles. This time, the safe house was inaccessible despite the icon indicating that the player couldn't access it, as if the trigger to do so had been removed. There was, however, one job available, and that was dominate the dance floor. I went over to Rajan's palace and went up to the door. As I did, the game cut to black before fading to an open view of the ballroom. I could see Neela and Carmelita standing on the dance floor. Bentley's dialogue did not play. I couldn't see the other characters in Rajan, as according to this version of the game, he did not exist. There were no cutout silhouettes of the other guests either, just Neela and Carmelita Fox. Sly entered into view in his tuxedo and made his way down to the dance floor. He approached Constable Neela, and the usual dialogue in the normal game ensued before Neela says "Enchanté" and the two dance. The players then required to press certain buttons in QuickTime events to perform dance moves. This part was easy. However, during the mission, something rather unexpected happened. Neela suddenly stopped dancing and slapped Sly in the face. When Neela did this, Carmelita walked over to the back of Sly and stopped. The two stood there for a minute, and then they began to tear at Sly's clothes. It was to the point where it almost showed his body. Carmelita and Neela then began undressing. I knew what was going to happen, and at this point, I had eject. I threw the controller on the ground, where I got up and walked over to the PS2 before slamming the tip of my index finger against the eject button. The blue light flashed, and as I did this, I looked up to the television screen. Carmelita and Neela stopped undressing and had their heads turned towards the camera, where they gave this piercing, angry glare that stared into my soul before the screen went black as the PS2 ejected the disc. I took it out and placed it back in its case before proceeding to walk over to my game shelf. I took out my damaged copy of Sly 2 that was lying between Sly 1 and Sly 3 and replaced it with my other copy. I placed the damaged copy on the shelf ledge. It's been a few minutes since I played the game and I don't know what to think of it. This question lingers in my head. Why? Is this made as a joke or prank, or as someone's fetish fuel? I mean, it's not against that kind of stuff, but if it's one... I'm not against that kind of stuff, but if it is one of those things, I got to hand it to them. They did a good job, but I'm not getting rid of it yet. I want to know where it came from and who made it, because all I want is some answers. So yeah, when looking for a creepypasta to read for this video, I also needed to record some footage. So obviously you're seeing footage of Sly 1, which got me thinking, do any Sly Cooper creepypastas exist? And when I searched up Sly Cooper creepypastas on Google, I saw two. This one, Are You Ready to Play Again? And another one called The Nightmare. I'll probably read that one after I give my thoughts on this one. But this one obviously is not amazing, unfortunately. This creepypasta is literally just, as you know, the protagonist of the story puts it, fetish fuel. That's basically all this is. And this story is also chock full of errors, so that alone doesn't ruin the story. Like, it's hard to read with stuff when there's like a bunch in a story like this. So, and on top of that, like this story again, it's just fetish fuel. It's nothing very. It's not good, which is unfortunate because we've had quite a few amazing creepypastas recently. So, and I'm gonna be honest. The rest of the creepypastas I have planned for this month aren't very good either. They're not going to be very good the rest of the month, but yeah, I guess we would. I guess it was to the point to where, you know what, we had enough good creepypastas. Finish the month off with some terrible ones. And unfortunately, this was one of those terrible ones. And I'm not just saying that because I hate Sly 2. I do not like Sly 2. Sly 2 was not is not as good as people say it is. I'm gonna give a hot take here. I think Sly 4 was better than Sly 2. Granted, yes, the story of Sly 4 was literally just a rehash of Sly 1, except with Sly's ancestors. And the writing also was fucking ruined. They basically just put a bunch of collectibles in the game instead of having better writing. However, on a gameplay standpoint, again, Sly 4 honestly to me is much better gameplay wise than Sly 2 is. And if you saw my playthroughs of the game, you would know that I do not like Sly 2, and from a gameplay standpoint, I prefer Sly 4. I'm not saying the story is terrible just because it focused on Sly 2. This isn't Ben Drowned. When I hate Ben Drowned purely because I hate Majora's Mask. But this one is not like that. This story just was poorly written. It's full of errors and again, just fetish fuel. So, yeah, unfortunately, Sly 2, Are You Ready to Play Again? Is not a good story. And with my final thoughts on this story done, let's go ahead and read the other Sly Cooper story I found. I've always been a fan of Sucker Punch's games, from titles like Infamous to my personal favorite being Sly Cooper. For those who don't know what Sly Cooper is, I recommend looking it up, as it is a very cleverly made game with stealth and combat in a good balance. Oh yeah, and everyone is a humanoid animal in the game. In the year 2005, Sucker Punch released the third installment to its franchise, Sly Cooper. It left off the series with the main protagonist with amnesia. The gang assembled throughout the game go their separate ways, and the mention of a time machine after the credits. It was around the age of 9 I discovered the use of the internet to find cheat codes was possible for me, so immediately I began to search through. After rebeating the first two titles, my mind began to rush with excitement at the third title and the possible cheats. After getting to a certain part in Dimitri's level of retrieving his father's stolen gear, I remembered a cheat code to make the giant lizard things non-hostile, which would make the treasure hunting phase a lot easier. After searching through some sites, one in particular caught my eye. It was titled The Nightmare. Nightmare mode said it would change the animation of certain characters and re-enable a secret area cut out from the game. I tried out the cheat, but nothing happened, so I simply decided to continue on with my life. About a year ago, I decided to replay Sly Cooper 3 because it was confirmed there would be a Sly Cooper 4. When I loaded up one of the saves, I received a message pop up on the game saying, cheat enabled. I wondered what it meant until I remembered the cheat I did 2 years previously on that save file. To my surprise, everything seemed normal at first. But when I went to play Bentley, though, he was missing his wheelchair and was crawling across the floor to move. When I went to play as Murray, he seemed to be anorexic, missing his huge pink belly. Sly was missing his cane and looked as if he was frantically searching for it. I eventually scrolled up to the top of the World Select menu and I saw a new level entitled The Nightmare. I was so excited that I quickly selected it. I was spawned into a purplish open plain and a wall on all four sides. Shortly after that, a jump scare happened in which the final boss of the game appeared to be pounding his chest while standing over the body of one of his experiments. A cutscene began, like a cutscene during a mission, and there was no sound to the characters' voices. Just the text. Mary stomp kicked Bentley into his arms and threw him at the wall and ran. Then the guru appeared on a wolf's back and began to attack Sly. Dimitri attacks the guru with the Panda King, only to be launched from Penelope's RC Chopper's hook. Then her RC Chopper was shot down by the Panda King, only to be crushed by the falling RC. There was no blood or gore, only the smoke that happens when defeating an enemy. Then the screen went to Sly. Bentley seemed to shout, "What have you done?" At that moment, the screen faded to black. Sometime later, Carmelita Fox, Sly's love interest, was seen walking towards the scene of the accident, and what I saw was really terrifying. A pile of rubble with what looked like charred bodies. Besides being very familiar, it was about the bodies of the members of the Cooper clan and their enemies. Where at the top was Sly with a terrifying smile as if he were drugged before dying. Carmelita showed a lot of fear in every step she took, showing that she no longer wanted to be there. So without further ado, she just asked for an escort to return to Paris, but she said it as if she were going to fall into madness. Then I was simply kicked out of the level to the World Select screen. I checked if the Nightmare was still there, and it was. After watching it a few more times, I still was clueless as to what was really happening in the cutscene. I would have checked the site where I found the cheat code, but the site was deleted over the years. I don't know exactly why someone would program this cutscene in character models, and frankly, I don't think I ever will know. I still love the Sly Cooper franchise. I even own the newest addition to the franchise, but every now and then I'll think about that day. What did Sly do to cause this chaos? The world of gaming may never know. But yeah, this one also very terrible, and I think the story was also written by the same author. Like, it's still got the same, like, errors and all that written into the story. Like, it's still very heavily coded in, like, spelling, grammar mistakes, and all that. Which, again, makes me feel like it was written by the same author of the first story. And I say that because, much like the first story, this one was absolutely terrible. And what makes it worse is it takes place during my favorite Sly game, Sly 3, Honor Among Thieves. It's my favorite Sly Cooper game. And unfortunately, this story just was not very good, which is a shame. Because the game is amazing, whereas the story, just why? And apparently there are more Sly Cooper creepypastas than these two. But given as bad as these two were, I doubt those are going to be any good. Because if there was one franchise I never thought I would see creepypastas of, it would be Sly Cooper. Like, I never thought I would see anything like that. But here we are, read two terrible Sly Cooper creepypastas. But yeah, this story was also very cliched, where you play a game as a kid, so you decide to look up cheat codes for some of your favorite games, and then the game does something like this, where the characters get killed and all that. Like, it reminds me of that one Ocarina of Time creepypasta with, the evil great fairy and all that. It reminds me of that Ocarina of Time creepypasta. And it's weird because I remember that Ocarina of Time creepypasta being very well written and pretty good. This one honestly just feels like it was trying to do the same thing that story did, but with Sly Cooper instead. And instead of actual gameplay, it was literally just a cutscene. Like, that's not really anything to write home about. Which also brings me to remembering the Toho highly responsive to the No More Prayers creepypasta based off Toho 1, where literally it was very terribly written, because the only thing that was quote unquote creepy about it was a differently colored title screen. Other than that, the game was literally just the same. This story reminds me of that. Except instead of a title screen and it being a Toho game, it's a Sly Cooper game that just gives me vibes of an old Ocarina of Time creepypasta. And that's a creepypasta I have also been wanting to read for a while. However, it's a very long one from what I remember, so if anything, I would have to do it in parts. Much like another one I've been wanting to read myself for a while. But yeah, that was two terribly written Sly Cooper creepypastas. Again, normally this is where I would say if you have any specific creepypastas you want me to read, let me know in the comments. But again, I have plans for the creepypastas I'm going to be reading for the rest of the month. So I'm not really going to do that. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. And get ready for another reading tomorrow.